In January 1921, a loaf of bread in Berlin cost 1 mark. By November 1923, the same loaf cost 200 billion marks. Not 200, not 200,000, not 200 million, 200 billion. Workers were paid twice a day because their morning wages were worthless by afternoon. Restaurants changed menu prices while customers ate. Children stacked bundles of banknotes like building blocks because the paper was worth nothing. People burned money to heat their homes because buying firewood cost more than burning cash. This was the Weimar hyperinflation, the fastest destruction of a currency in modern history. But here's what they don't teach you in economics class. The hyperinflation didn't just destroy money. It destroyed the German middle class, the engineers who had saved for retirement, the teachers who had invested in government bonds, the doctors with life insurance policies, everyone who had done everything right, worked hard, saved money, planned for the future. All of it gone. Not in decades, in 18 months. And when the middle class died, democracy died with it. Because 10 years later, the people who lost everything voted for Adolf Hitler. This is the story of how a government destroys a currency, how currency death destroys a society, and why the same 5-stage pattern keeps repeating in Argentina, Turkey, and Lebanon. If you think your currency is safe because your government says so, the Germans thought the same thing in 1921. They were wrong. Every currency death begins the same way, with debt that a government cannot repay, and a decision to print money instead of defaulting. For Germany in 1918, the debt was catastrophic. World War I had just ended. Germany had lost, and the Treaty of Versailles imposed reparations that would cripple the economy for generations. 132 billion gold marks. That's roughly $442 billion in today's money, to be paid to France, Britain, and Belgium over the course of decades. But Germany's economy was destroyed, industry devastated by war, workforce depleted, infrastructure in ruins. How do you pay 132 billion marks when your economy is collapsing? The government had 3 options. Option 1, raise taxes. Impossible, because the population was already impoverished from war. Option 2, default on the debt. Unthinkable because France and Britain would occupy more German territory. Option 3, print money. And that's what they chose. In 1921, the Reichsbank began printing marks to pay reparations. Not backed by gold, not backed by productivity, just paper. At first it seemed to work. Germany made reparation payments and avoided occupation. In 1921, the exchange rate was 60 marks to $1. Not great, but manageable. German exporters loved it because a weak mark made German goods cheaper internationally. But economists warned that you cannot print prosperity. Every mark created dilutes the value of existing marks. You're not creating wealth, you're redistributing it from savers to debtors, from the middle class to the government. But the warnings were ignored because in 1921, the inflation was only 50% annually. Painful, but survivable. The government called it temporary, a necessary measure to recover from war. This is stage 1, the debt trap. When a government borrows more than it can repay and chooses inflation over default, because inflation is a hidden tax, and most people don't notice it until it's too late. Stage 2 is when money printing becomes permanent policy, when temporary never ends. In 1922, the printing accelerated. The Reichsbank ran 24 hours a day, thousands of workers operating printing presses around the clock, and the mark kept falling. By July 1922, the exchange rate was 493 marks to $1. By December 1922, it was 7,500 marks to $1. A 12,400% devaluation in 1 year. Prices started doubling every few weeks. Workers demanded higher wages. The government printed more money to pay them, which caused more inflation, which required higher wages, which required more printing. A feedback loop with no exit. And the German middle class started to panic because their savings were evaporating. A teacher who had saved 10,000 marks over 20 years could have bought a house in 1914. By late 1922, those same 10,000 marks bought 2 loaves of bread. Life savings wiped out. But the government kept promising this was temporary. We're managing the situation. Trust us. Some people believed and kept their savings in marks. Others didn't. The wealthy converted marks into dollars, Swiss francs, and gold. They saw what was coming. But the middle class couldn't afford to convert, and they trusted their government, because trusting the mark meant trusting Germany. And patriotism is a powerful drug. This is stage 2, when money printing becomes normal, when inflation is blamed on speculators, foreign saboteurs, and enemies of the state, anyone except the central bank printing billions of marks. By late 1922, inflation was no longer 50% annually. It was 50% monthly. And when that reality spread, stage 3 began. Stage 3 is when people lose faith in the currency, when everyone realizes the money is dying, and everyone tries to escape at once. In early 1923, the psychological break happened. People stopped trusting the mark, not because prices were rising, but because they realized prices would never stop rising as long as the government kept printing. And the government had no reason to stop. Printing money was how they paid for everything. Reparations, government salaries, unemployment benefits. Printing was the only tool they had, so people adapted. Workers demanded daily pay instead of weekly, then twice daily, morning and evening. Because by evening, morning wages had lost half their value. Shops raised prices hourly. Restaurants printed new menus every day, sometimes multiple times per day. A meal that cost 5,000 marks when you ordered might cost 8,000 marks when the bill arrived. And people started spending immediately. The moment you received money, you spent it on anything. Food you didn't need, clothes you didn't want, furniture you had no room for, because holding money was losing money. This is called the flight from currency. When people abandon money, it's not because it's worthless today, but because they know it will be worthless tomorrow. And that accelerates the collapse. When everyone spends immediately, demand explodes, which drives prices higher, which makes money lose value faster. By summer 1923, prices were doubling every few days. A kilogram of bread. June 1923, 1,200 marks. July 1923, 100,000 marks. August 1923, 1 million marks. A doctor who had worked for 40 years received a pension of 10,000 marks per month. In 1914, that was a comfortable salary. In August 1923, it bought one egg for a month of pension. Suicides spiked. Elderly people who had saved their entire lives had nothing. This is stage 3, the acceleration. When faith breaks. When the rush to escape destroys what little value remains. Stage 4 is when the currency dies completely. When prices rise hourly. When money becomes worthless paper. When civilization starts to unravel. By November 1923, Germany had entered full hyperinflation. The numbers became incomprehensible. A loaf of bread, 200 billion marks. A newspaper, 200 billion marks. A kilogram of butter, 6 trillion marks. The Reichsbank was printing notes in denominations of 100 trillion marks. For context, the entire German money supply in 1914 was 6 billion marks. By November 1923, they were printing single notes worth 100 trillion. And they still weren't enough, because by the time notes were printed, they were already worthless. The exchange rate by November 1923 was 4.2 trillion marks to $1. Shopkeepers stopped counting money. They waited. You didn't pay with bills. You paid with baskets of bills, wheelbarrows of bills. Crime exploded because money was worthless, while goods retained value. Theft became rampant. Farmers refused to sell crops for marks. They wanted barter, food for clothes, grain for tools, anything but paper money. Cities started running out of food because farmers wouldn't trade for worthless currency. Social order was breaking down. Engineers became beggars. Teachers sold furniture for food. Doctors worked for bread instead of money. A lifetime of education, a lifetime of work, a lifetime of savings, all worthless. And the psychological damage was permanent. These weren't lazy people. These were people who had done everything right, worked hard, saved money, trusted the system, and the system destroyed them. While speculators who borrowed marks and bought real assets prospered, the hyperinflation didn't hurt everyone equally. It destroyed savers and rewarded speculators. It punished prudence and rewarded recklessness. It inverted morality. And when morality inverts, society collapses. This is stage 4, when the currency dies, when the middle class is destroyed, and when democracy's foundation crumbles. Stage 5 is the aftermath, when the currency is abandoned, when the damage becomes permanent, and when extremism fills the void. In November 1923, the German government finally stopped printing. They introduced a new currency called the Rentenmark, backed by land and industrial assets instead of nothing. One Rentenmark equaled 1 trillion old marks. Overnight, the hyperinflation stopped. Prices stabilized. The currency crisis was over, but the damage was permanent. The German middle class had been obliterated. A generation's wealth was gone, and those people didn't forget. They didn't forgive. In 1923, they lost their savings. By 1929, the Great Depression hit Germany. Unemployment spiked to 30%, and the people who had lost everything once were losing again. They were angry at the Weimar government, at democracy itself, at the system that had destroyed them twice. In 1928, the Nazi Party received 2.6% of the vote. Irrelevant. By 1930, they received 18.3%. By 1932, 37.3%, the largest party in Germany. And in January 1933, Adolf Hitler became chancellor. The hyperinflation didn't directly cause the Nazis, but it created the conditions. It destroyed faith in democracy. It bankrupted the middle class. It created a population desperate for someone to blame. And the Nazis offered someone to blame. Jews, communists, foreign powers, enemies who had sabotaged Germany. The people who had lost everything believed it because they needed an explanation. They needed someone to blame. And the Nazis gave them one. This is stage 5, the political collapse that follows currency death. Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy money. It destroys trust in government, in institutions, in the system itself. And when trust dies, extremism fills the vacuum. Weimar Germany taught the world a lesson. Currency death leads to political death. But the lesson didn't stick because the same pattern keeps repeating. Argentina, the same 5 stages playing out in real time. Stage 1, the debt trap. Argentina owes over $400 billion in external and internal debt, more than the economy can repay. So the government prints pesos to pay obligations, just like Germany in 1921. Stage 2, the money printing. The Argentine Central Bank has been printing pesos for years. Inflation hit 211%, the highest in decades. Workers demand raises every month. The government prints more to pay them, exactly like Germany in 1922. Stage 3, the acceleration. Argentinians are fleeing the peso. The moment they're paid, they convert to dollars. They buy anything that holds value: food, electronics, real estate, because holding pesos means losing money daily. Just like Germans in 1923, stage 4, approaching hyperinflation. Argentina isn't at Weimar levels yet, but the trajectory is identical. Prices change weekly. The peso has lost over 95% of its value in recent years. Faith is breaking. Stage 5, political extremism. Argentina elected Javier Milei, a radical libertarian who promised to abolish the central bank and dollarize the economy. He won because people are desperate, because they've lost everything to inflation, because they need someone to blame, just like Germany in 1930. And it's not just Argentina, Turkey. Inflation peaked at 85% before moderating. The lira has lost 85% against the dollar since 2018. Erdogan consolidating authoritarian power. Lebanon. The pound lost 98% of its value since 2019. Banks froze deposits, the government collapsed, and there was political chaos. Venezuela. Hyperinflation peaked at over 1.6 million%. The believer abandoned for dollars. Maduro dictatorship entrenched. Different countries, different languages. Same 5 stages, same currency death, same political instability that follows. The pattern never changes. Only the names change. The country's experiencing stage 3 and 4 right now. Watch for stage 5 in the years ahead. Political collapse, authoritarian takeovers, civil unrest. Because currency death always precedes political death. Weimar proved it. Argentina is proving it again. If you've watched this far, you understand the currency death cycle. You see how Weimar 1923 and Argentina today follow the exact same 5 stages. Subscribe to Capital Origins. Because when inflation accelerates in your country, when your government starts blaming everyone except their own printing, you'll want to know which stage you're in and how the pattern ends. Currency death always follows the same sequence: debt trap, money printing, psychological break, hyperinflation, political collapse. The only question is whether you'll recognize it in time or become another statistic. Hit subscribe, because Weimar happened a century ago, but the printing presses are running right now in Buenos Aires, Ankara, Beirut, and Caracas. And the pattern never changes. You just need to recognize it before your savings become wallpaper.